The weight of seeing too much. When awareness becomes your prison, the unbearable clarity. There's a particular kind of consciousness that most people never experience, and perhaps that's a mercy. It's not intelligence, though it masquerades as such. It's not wisdom, though others often mistake it for that. It's a relentless, unblinking awareness that transforms every moment into an archaeological dig, every conversation into a complex equation, every silence into a message that demands decoding. Imagine never being able to simply be in a moment. Imagine your mind as a surveillance system that never sleeps, cataloging microexpressions, tracking tonal shifts, archiving every inconsistency between what people say and what their bodies reveal. This isn't paranoia. This is hyper-awareness, and it's both a superpower and a life sentence. Most people experience life through frosted glass, details blurred just enough to make existence manageable, to allow rest, to permit the luxury of not knowing. But for those cursed with crystalline perception, there is no merciful blur. Every fracture is visible, every contradiction is glaring. Every emotional undercurrent is felt with the intensity of a riptide. This is what it means to be too aware. And if you recognize yourself in these words, what follows may finally help you understand why you're so exhausted. The perpetual equation, when life becomes a problem to solve for the hyperware mind, existence isn't a river to float down. It's a series of equations demanding immediate solution. You don't just have conversation. You conduct real-time forensic analysis. Why did they hesitate for 1.3 seconds before answering? Why did their smile contract at the corners half a beat too early? Why did they phrase it that way instead of the more natural alternative? A simple "how are you" becomes an intelligence operation. You're simultaneously participating in the exchange and running parallel processing, analyzing word choice, measuring vocal inflection, calculating the delta between their stated mood and their physiological tells. This isn't conscious choice. Your nervous system doesn't know how to engage without also monitoring. It's like trying to enjoy a movie while simultaneously being the director, cinematographer, and film critic all at once, all the time. The cruelty of this mental architecture is that it feels responsible. It feels like due diligence. You're not overthinking, you're being thorough. You're not paranoid, you're pattern matching. You're not anxious, you're simply refusing to be blindsided again. But here's what's actually happening. The equation has replaced the experience. You've become so skilled at solving what moments mean that you've forgotten how to inhabit what moments are. Precision has murdered presence. Analysis has assassinated aliveness. Every text message isn't communication, it's a data point. Every delayed response isn't timing. It's a signal requiring interpretation. Every shift in someone's energy isn't just their day. It's a puzzle piece that must fit into your constantly updating model of reality. And beneath all this intellectual activity lies a simple, devastating truth. You're not solving life. You're avoiding feeling it. The tyranny of meta-awareness. Watching yourself watch yourself. There's a psychological phenomenon that separates the deeply aware from everyone else. It's called metacognition, the ability to observe your own thought processes in real time. For most people, it's an occasional visitor. For you, it's a permanent resident that never pays rent. You don't just feel sad, you notice yourself feeling sad, then immediately interrogate the sadness. Is this proportional? Is this old trauma or present reality? What does this say about my emotional regulation? Why am I still struggling with this? By the time the emotion completes its natural cycle, your analytical mind has already performed an autopsy on it. Even joy isn't safe. You can't laugh without some part of you stepping back, clipboard in hand, documenting the laughter. How long will this last? What will end it? Should I be feeling this given what I know is coming? This is the peculiar hell of meta-awareness. You're simultaneously the dancer and the dance critic. You're ice skating while grading your own performance. You're telling a story while editing it in real time. You're living your life while writing its review. This creates depth. Yes, but it also creates distance, an unbridgeable gap between you and direct experience. You're always slightly removed, always watching yourself through a two-way mirror, never fully absorbed in the moment, because part of you is taking notes on your absorption. Over time, this transforms your inner world into a panopticon. Every thought is monitored. Every feeling is reviewed. Every impulse is filtered through multiple layers of self-surveillance before it's permitted to exist. What began as self-awareness curdles into self-interruption. You can no longer think a thought without thinking about thinking it. You can no longer feel a feeling without analyzing the feeling about the feeling. Spontaneity becomes impossible. Authenticity becomes a performance you're simultaneously starring in and directing. And slowly, so slowly you don't notice it happening. You stop being a person and become a consciousness studying itself, forever separate, forever observing, forever alone. When you see behind the curtain, the grief of lost innocence, there comes a moment in the life of every hyper-aware person when perception crosses a threshold it can never uncross. You begin to see the machinery beneath human behavior, the invisible wires, the hidden motivations, the gap between what people believe about themselves and what they actually are. You notice that kindness often carries invoices, that affection frequently includes terms and conditions, that love and fear are so entangled that separating them becomes impossible. You realize that most communication is translation, most connection is projection, most certainty is performance masking terror. And once you see this, truly see it, something precious dies. Not cynicism, not bitterness, something more fundamental, relational innocence. The ability to take words at face value, to receive gestures without deconstruction, to experience love as something uncomplicated, unambiguous, uncontaminated by analysis. This is the loss no one prepares you for. You don't become cruel, you become careful. You don't become jaded, you become impossibly, exhaustingly aware of how fragile everything is, how much projection masquerades as perception, how often people contradict themselves without noticing, how love and manipulation can coexist in the same gesture. Compliments arrive with footnotes. Apologies come with fine print. Promises sound conditional even when they're sincere. You can still appreciate beautiful moments, but you're also aware of the scaffolding holding them together, the psychological needs driving them, the ways they might collapse. Relationships become chess games where you see 12 moves ahead. Conversations become translation exercises where you're simultaneously hearing what's said and decoding what isn't. This knowledge doesn't make you superior. It makes you lonely. Because once you've seen behind the curtain, you can't fully lose yourself in the performance anymore. And that loss, the loss of being able to simply believe, to simply trust, to simply receive without analyzing, is a grief that has no ritual, no recognition, no name. The unbearable empathy, carrying everyone's emotional weather for the hyper-aware. Empathy isn't a skill you activate. It's an operating system running constantly in the background, consuming resources, never powering down. You don't just listen to people, you feel the emotional topology beneath their words. The landscape of their inner world becomes yours. Their tension lives in your shoulders. Their unspoken sadness settles in your chest. Their anxiety ripples through your nervous system like a stone thrown in still water. Psychologists call this cognitive empathy with affective overflow. You call it Tuesday. Before someone finishes their sentence, you've already mapped their emotional state, the tightness in their jaw, the micro-retreat in their posture, the slight elevation in vocal pitch that signals suppressed distress. You absorb all of it, not because you're trying to, because your nervous system doesn't know how not to. This is what people never see from the outside. They think you're calm, grounded, emotionally intelligent. You're the person who always knows the right thing to say, who modulates your tone perfectly, who makes others feel seen and safe. But here's the secret cost: you've become an emotional container for everyone around you. You hold their tension so they don't have to feel it. You metabolize their anxiety so they can stay regulated. You carry their unspoken feelings because your system automatically absorbs whatever isn't being processed in the room. Over time, this creates a devastating imbalance. You become the shock absorber in every relationship, the emotional translator, the invisible stabilizer who ensures everyone else can remain comfortable. And because you do this so seamlessly, no one thinks to ask whether you need holding, whether you need someone to see you the way you see them, whether carrying everyone else's emotional weather is leaving you depleted. The tragic irony is that your empathy creates connection for others while generating isolation for you. Because when you're the one who always understands, people forget that you might need understanding too. This isn't compassion fatigue. It's something more fundamental: empathic dissolution. You've become so permeable to others' emotional states that the boundary between their feelings and yours has eroded. You're no longer sure which anxiety is yours and which you absorbed from the room, which sadness originated in your experience, and which migrated from someone else's unprocessed grief. You're not just tuned in. You're broadcasting everyone else's frequency simultaneously, and the static is becoming unbearable. The body never lies. When sensation becomes surveillance, awareness doesn't only live in your thoughts. For many hyper-aware people, the body is where the real battle occurs. You possess something called heightened interoceptive awareness, the ability to detect subtle internal sensations most people never notice. Every shift in heart rate, every change in breathing, every flutter of tension, every microscopic alteration in your internal state. Most people live in bodies that whisper. Yours screams. You don't just feel anxious, you notice your heart rate accelerating before the thought "I'm anxious" even forms. You sense the chest tightening, the breath shallowing, the stomach dropping. These sensations register as data, and your mind immediately begins threat assessment. Something is wrong. Danger is approaching. I need to figure out what this means. This is where awareness transforms into anxiety's launching pad. When every bodily sensation becomes meaningful, when every flutter requires interpretation, the body stops being a home and becomes a surveillance state. A random heart palpitation isn't just a palpitation, it's a potential cardiac event. Fatigue isn't just tiredness, it's a symptom demanding diagnosis. Restlessness isn't just energy, it's a problem that needs solving. The exquisite cruelty is that this sensitivity developed to protect you. A nervous system that learned to detect threats early, to stay one step ahead of danger, to read subtle shifts before they became crises. But without recalibration, interoception cannibalizes itself. Your body starts monitoring itself the way it once monitored external threats. The system designed to keep you safe begins generating the very anxiety it was meant to prevent. This creates a closed loop of suffering, sensation, interpretation, anxiety. More sensation, more interpretation, more anxiety. Your body becomes a prison of signals that never quiet. And the more aware you become of your internal state, the louder and more distressing that state becomes. The goal isn't to feel less. That's impossible and undesirable. The goal is learning which sensations require attention and which can simply move through you without being transformed into narratives of danger. Your body isn't your enemy. It's just speaking a language you were never taught to understand without fear. The archaeology of awareness, how survival became identity. This didn't start yesterday. Hyperawareness has a biography. And understanding that biography is the first step toward freedom. For most overly aware adults, it began in childhood, not as a personality trait, but as a survival adaptation. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where emotional weather changed without warning, where a parent's mood could shift from calm to storm in moments, where safety required reading subtle cues, the tone before the words, the silence before the explosion, the energy in the room before you decided whether to speak or disappear. No one sat you down and taught you these skills. Your nervous system learned them automatically, the way a plant grows toward light. You learn to scan rooms the instant you enter them, detect emotional shifts before they fully formed, modulate your own expression to match what was safe, become small when necessary, helpful when required, invisible when ideal. This wasn't weakness, this was intelligence in action. Your hyperawareness was the price of surviving an unpredictable emotional environment. Children in unstable situations develop what's called threat-based vigilance, a finely tuned nervous system that excels at pattern recognition, prediction, and preemptive adaptation. Your brain's prefrontal cortex became exceptional at forecasting. Your amygdala became lightning fast at detecting danger. Your body learned to stay perpetually ready. Over time, vigilance became awareness. Awareness became identity. And the child who needed to pay attention to survive became an adult who can't stop paying attention even when the danger has long passed. This is critical to understand. You're not broken. You're adapted. Your sensitivity wasn't born from fragility. It was forged in the crucible of emotional complexity. You became hyper-aware because awareness mattered, because noticing early meant managing better, because reading the room meant staying safer. The tragedy is that nervous systems don't automatically update their threat models. Your environment may be stable now. Your relationships may be healthy. Your life may be safe, but your nervous system is still running software written for a different era, still scanning for threats that no longer exist, still preparing for betrayals that aren't coming, still staying alert, because it never learned that the war ended. This is why you're exhausted. Not because life is too demanding, but because your internal security system never received the memo that it's allowed to power down. Understanding this transforms everything. Self-judgment becomes self-compassion. What's wrong with me becomes what happened to me, and the work shifts from fixing yourself to gently teaching your nervous system that it's safe now, even if the sensitivity remains. The illusion of control, when prediction replaces presence at some point. Hyperawareness evolves into something more insidious, the illusion that if you can predict everything, you can prevent pain. Your mind begins running simulations constantly. If they pull away, I'll already know why and I'll be prepared. If the relationship ends, I'll have seen it coming and it won't devastate me. If I analyze every outcome beforehand, I can choose the path with minimal risk. Understanding becomes armor. Prediction becomes pseudo-control. And slowly, imperceptibly, you stop living in the present because you're too busy stress-testing the future. This is how hyperawareness metastasizes into analysis paralysis. Every decision carries impossible weight. Every action must be filtered through 1,000 potential consequences. You've mentally lived 30 versions of tomorrow before today has finished unfolding. So you hesitate, you delay, you overthink. Not because you're indecisive, but because you're trying to achieve the impossible, certainty in an uncertain world. The bitter irony is that this attempt at control creates the very suffering it's designed to prevent. Joy arrives, but you're already scanning for its expiration date. Connection forms, but you're calculating distance. Timing, probability of loss. Beautiful moments unfold, but you're watching for the crack that will shatter them. Hyperawareness, when weaponized as control, doesn't create safety. It creates a prison where you're simultaneously the architect, guard, and inmate. You're trying to outthink uncertainty, to stay one step ahead of pain, to never be caught off guard again. But here's what that strategy costs you: life itself. Because when you're managing every moment instead of inhabiting it, when you're predicting instead of experiencing, when you're armored instead of available, you're not protecting yourself. You're disappearing. The path to lightness, carrying less, seeing clearly. The solution to hyperawareness isn't seeing less. It's carrying less. For years, awareness has felt like a responsibility. If you noticed something, you felt obligated to interpret it, solve it, act on it, metabolize it. But here's the liberation. Not every signal is an assignment. Not every shift requires response. Not every insight demands action. Not every observation needs to be followed to its conclusion. This is where awareness matures into wisdom, when you develop what I call selective permeability. The ability to notice without absorbing, recognize without reacting, see without caring, understand without becoming responsible for fixing. Here are the truths that recalibrate an overwhelmed nervous system. Not every silence is a message. Sometimes people are just tired, distracted, or processing their own internal weather. Not every feeling requires action. Emotions can move through you like weather patterns, observed, allowed, released without being solved, explained, or fixed. Not every insight needs expression. Some truths are meant to be held quietly, neither shared nor acted upon nor analyzed further. This isn't about becoming numb or indifferent. This is about restoring boundaries where there were none. Awareness without boundaries becomes suffering. Awareness with boundaries becomes clarity. When you stop treating every perception as urgent, something miraculous happens. Your nervous system begins to exhale. The body learns that noticing doesn't equal danger. The mind learns it doesn't have to stay 3 steps ahead to be safe. The heart learns it can rest between beats. This shift requires practice. It will feel uncomfortable initially, like loosening a grip you've relied on for decades. You'll feel guilty for not absorbing someone else's anxiety. You'll feel irresponsible for not analyzing every interaction. You'll feel exposed for not predicting every possible outcome. Lean into that discomfort. It's not danger, it's unfamiliarity. Slowly, subtly, you'll notice changes. You'll laugh without immediately examining why the laughter feels good. You'll listen without pre-formulating your response. You'll experience emotions without instantly translating them. You'll be in conversations without running parallel threat assessments. You'll discover that you can still understand people deeply without losing yourself in their experience. That you can notice patterns without becoming enslaved to them. That you can be aware without being consumed. You won't lose your depth. You'll reclaim your presence. And awareness, instead of weighing you down like chains, will start to feel like peripheral vision, useful, informative, but no longer the only thing you see. The gentle wisdom of refined awareness, the end point isn't eliminating awareness, it's refining it. When awareness is softened by acceptance rather than sharpened by anxiety, it transforms from a spotlight into ambient light. It illuminates without blinding. It informs without overwhelming. You stop trying to control every outcome because you've learned that control was always an illusion. You stop decoding every silence because you've learned that some silences are just silence. You stop carrying everyone's emotional weight because you've learned that people can hold their own. This is where awareness becomes wisdom. You still notice deeply, but you don't cling to what you notice. You still feel intensely, but you let emotions move through instead of building homes for them. You still understand people, but you no longer abandon yourself to live inside their experience. Prediction gives way to presence. Fear gives way to curiosity. Control gives way to trust. And life becomes lighter, not because it's simpler or easier, but because you're no longer trying to carry it all at once. You've learned the most important lesson hyperaware people rarely learn. Some things are meant to be witnessed, not solved, felt, not analyzed, experienced, not understood. Your awareness doesn't diminish, it just stops trying to do everything. And in that surrender, you discover something you thought you'd lost forever. The ability to simply be without watching yourself being, without preparing for what comes next, without translating the present into predictions about the future. You discover rest, not the rest of sleep, but the rest of presence, where awareness exists without effort, understanding arrives without strain, and you can finally exhale into the moment instead of bracing for the next one. This is freedom, not from awareness, but through it. If this resonated, if you saw yourself in these words, know that you're not alone in this particular form of beautiful, exhausting consciousness. This channel exists for minds like yours. For people who feel deeply, think carefully, and carry more than they should. For those who've turned awareness into both gift and burden, and are searching for the wisdom to separate one from the other. If this exploration gave you clarity, consider subscribing. These conversations continue, and your presence in them matters. And if any part of this helped you feel understood, if it named something you've carried without language, leave your reflection in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to feel less alone in their own awareness. Not everyone will understand this particular weight. But here in this space, we do.